Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, discussing my thoughts on episode 11 of the anime series, Aris to Zouroku, and it broke my ever-loving heart to hear Hattori's summarization of where her family is, that instability that has surrounded and consumed her family, her parents fighting, and how she feels the centermost blame for all of that. She's almost considering, as if it were a viable option, could I stay within Wonderland? Might I choose to stay within Wonderland rather than return home? Because she feels like it is her responsibility, like the weight of the world is on her shoulders. Without her existence, her family, her mother and father could have a more happy life. And it just really got to me. It really affected me. Because that is something that unfortunately is very common in such a scenario, that human fragility of mind, even for I myself, who did not have a broken home. There was a time in my rebellious youth where I didn't see eye to eye with my parents, and I didn't really feel like we were on the same page. And because of bullying at school and all these other mitigating circumstances, I would be brought around to thinking maybe life would have been better for everyone around me had I never been born into this world, had I never been brought into existence. And from that point of view, even though it was a different culmination to that equation for me, myself personally, I still found a heavy amount of relatability with Hattori and her plight, and seeing her breaking down, and that rapport that was burgeoning between she and Sana, which has entirely displaced by the end of the episode that distrust and that disdain that was born out of their first encounters. I don't think they could have made any more pitch perfect a choice than to have it be Sana be the one to extend that proverbial olive branch and reason things out for Hattori. I've spoken a lot about how, Sana has had guidance, and there's a lot of stuff she's having to figure out on her own, but while guided by Zouroku and Sanai and, Ichijo and all this kind of stuff. And Hattori has had none of that. She has no one she can turn to. And she's really gliding by the seat of her pants, making all these hard decisions with the weight of the world on her shoulders. And she's got to feel like the loneliest person in the world. And that's something also very common out of such a broken home scenario. Even without a broken home, I mean, you can be in a crowded room and still feel like you're entirely alone. You could be the loneliest person in the world. And that's very much how Hattori feels. And I'm glad it was not Ichijo. It was not Zouroku. It was not Sanai. It was not another adult. It was not Hattori's parents in any way, shape, or form. It was Sana. They were, at their first encounter, antagonistic toward each other. They wanted to take each other down. But the more time they spent together, Sana really began to feel remorse for having gotten them into this situation. Letting her sense of vengeance and that desire to punish the wickedness of Hattori get the best of her. And so she apologized, and that's really what got the snowball rolling. Where Hattori was like, no, maybe this was my fault. You maybe you don't have to apologize. Maybe I should apologize to you. And then the floodgates just let rip, and she spoke all about how, because of her failure to get into the elementary, acceptance exam, to pass that, her mother was angry, and this seems to have been the tipping point that started her parents arguing, and they've been arguing for years and years. And she feels like it's only because of that is the focal point of all of the hardships that her family is enduring. And for a time when she found this power in herself manifest, she could manipulate things to a happier side, to the side more, encapsulated by her ideal. But it was all a lie. And she's matured so much in how she's come to understand that. But with that maturity, with that realization, came the despair that maybe she was to blame. And I was so comforted and entranced by Sana's reaching out to her. They weren't mortal enemies, but they saw each other as adversaries. And they confided in each other by the end of this episode, and they just brought each other around to this idea that life is only that much better for their mutual existing, for their both being alive. No matter what their circumstances are that are surrounding them, for better or worse, life would be poorer without them. And the same goes for just about anyone. And it really affected me. It brought tears to my eyes. And when Hattori made the first move to embrace Sana, after Sana had revealed all about herself, her origins, so far as we know, that she was born out of Wonderland as almost an observational guidepost for this consciousness that Wonderland is, that it comprises, to try to understand the living, breathing human world around it. With this, Hattori embraces Sana and just wants to hold her, and is reflecting back on that warmth and compassion that she felt from her mother in a very vulnerable moment when she, I guess it was like the first day of school, and she went to introduce herself, and I think she messed it up, and she tried to do it again, and the class laughed at her and just belittled her and made her feel so vulnerable and so shaken and so sad. And her mother embraced her and held her dearly. And in that moment, Hattori and Sana both were able to feel the same warmth and compassion as an extension of that, but for each other. And it was beautiful. It was beautiful and emotional, impactful, compelling, entrancing, miraculous. Maybe I'm overselling it, but that's how I felt watching it. A lot of the in-between stuff of them traveling through Wonderland and getting from point A to point B, where they finally came upon this very emotional, revelatory construct between them both, was it didn't really need to be there. It was padding out the story and everything, getting them to move so they wouldn't be there immediately when Zouroku and Sanai and Ichijo went into Wonderland to try to find them, so they wouldn't be right there waiting, and it padded out the time so they could have this most desired moment shared between them. And it made it all worth it for me. I also love the moment when Ichijo has been dispatched because of the little white rabbit. And so Zouroku and Sanai are on their own, traveling and traversing through Wonderland, trying to find Hattori and Sana. And there's that moment when, because inside Wonderland, all of it is constructs are appearing out of left, right, and center, out of nowhere, commemorating memories, special memories that Sana has had. And one of them is her playing with the twins, and another when Zouroku and Sanai are in like a boat or a canoe or whatever, you see this floating construct of that moment when, for all intents and purposes, the first half of the story in this season was wrapped, and they had saved Sana from the facility that had, captured and been testing her and everything like that. And they were flying up in the sky. They were floating all of the 1978 Superman between Superman and Lois Lane. That's what it always reminds me of. And it was such a sweet, beautiful moment between Zouroku and Sana just before he would officially, take her under adoption. And to see how special that is to her. And that was manifest. But the best part was his grumpy face and Sanai laughing, because she realizes what that means, how much that means he means to Sana and such like that. I thought it was interesting also that she's constantly referring to them not as my sister and my grandfather, but my Sanai and my Zouroku. She still doesn't quite grasp what a family is. This is your adoptive sister. This is your adoptive father or grandfather. To her, they are the people they are. They are the names that she knows them as, not necessarily as a family, even though that's how she feels about it. it goes back to spelling out why she says frazzled for all of her unsettled feelings, whether it's anger, sadness, remorse. She doesn't quite know what the definitions of all of those emotions are. So similarly so with the familial unit, she doesn't quite understand, this is my grandfather, this is my sister, you know. And just further spelling out how alien she really is, in a sense. And, you know, it was just, I thought all around this episode was just beautiful for that. It's cute, it's quirky, and I really just felt so much for Hattori and Sana when they finally confided in each other and embraced each other and held each other and comforted each other. If only more of us in the world were so empathetic and were so understanding, there'd be so much less hate and conflict. And at least for my part, that's sort of the idealized vision I have of the world I wish we all lived in. You know, granted, there is the argument, the ages-old argument that, you know, the bad defines what is good for you. You know, you can't have the good without the bad, and the bad makes you appreciate the good all the more. I don't disagree. I just, you know, I look at the world, the current state of things, all the horrific things that happen, and sometimes I just wish it were a little easier, like all of those sitcoms growing up watching where the problem that was raised was resolved in the half-an-hour time slot. And these anime series and fictional series and settings, a problem that arises can actually be accomplished, can actually be overcome. And without such a loss, without such hardship, as to bring you about to feeling like what was the purpose to begin with, which is so frequent in life. And I loved this episode for that. And so I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below what you thought of episode 11 of Alice to Zouroku, if you've seen it as well, if you enjoyed it as much as I did, if you got the same emotional impact that I did as I described, with Hattori and Sana aligning and coming together and understanding each other finally, or if you could take it or leave it. You know, love it or hate it, anything goes in the comments below. Just love having that conversation. And yeah, that'll be pretty much it for me on this one. This video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.